In 1967, deep in the uncharted Amazon, 37 elite soldiers disappeared without a trace. No radio contact, no bodies. No official record of what happened. For decades, the operation was denied, scrubbed from every archive, every file. But one surviving recording surfaced years later. A soldier's trembling voice recounting what they found in the jungle. Something ancient. Something alive. Something calling. Imagine it. A jungle so dense it swallows sound, where even the insects fall silent. Men trained for war found themselves paralyzed by a rhythm that wasn't theirs. A heartbeat pulsing through the earth itself. They called it Operation Night Harvest. But officially, it never happened. So what exactly did these men uncover beneath the trees? Why did only 3 return? And why does the ground they stood on still register seismic vibrations to this day? Because some operations don't just vanish. They're buried. Before we descend into the jungle's darkness, take a moment to support this channel. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon. It helps more people uncover stories the government would rather keep forgotten. Now, keep the lights low, the volume up, and remember, what you're about to hear was never meant to be found. Chapter 1. The Mission That Never Existed. They called it Operation Night Harvest, though officially it never existed. No records, no mission brief, not even a mention in the Pentagon's black files. Yet, somewhere in 1967, deep in the uncharted veins of the Amazon rainforest, 37 American soldiers boarded 2 unmarked helicopters and vanished. No one ever filed a missing person report. No next of kin were notified, and when families asked, they were told the men had been reassigned to long-term overseas duty. But that wasn't true. Because the truth, the real story, was too strange, too dangerous to ever reach daylight. It began with a signal, a faint, rhythmic transmission detected by a U.S. reconnaissance satellite. At first, analysts thought it was seismic, maybe volcanic tremors. But the pattern was too precise, too deliberate. It repeated in intervals identical to a human heartbeat. Every attempt to trace its source led back to one set of coordinates, an isolated stretch of jungle near the Rio Negro, a region with no known settlements, no documented ruins. And yet the signal pulsed from there day and night for weeks. It wasn't just the Americans who noticed. Soviet listening stations picked it up too. Both sides went quiet. Then, both sent teams. That's how it always goes, doesn't it? When something unknown appears, governments don't turn away. They dig deeper. The U.S. military formed a small covert task force, linguists, biologists, communications experts, and a handful of hardened soldiers who'd seen every kind of hell, but not this. Their orders were simple. Locate the source of the transmission. Secure and contain if possible. Destroy if necessary. The kind of phrase that looks clean on paper but leaves blood in the soil. The man in charge was Captain Elias Kine, decorated, methodical, the kind of officer who obeyed orders without flinching. Under him served Sergeant Luis Morera, a jungle warfare specialist who knew how to move unseen through the trees, and Dr. Sofia Rojos, a civilian researcher brought in to analyze the signal. They were told it was geological, a tremor maybe, but on the transport flight south, the soldiers whispered otherwise. Some said the signal carried voices buried under the static, whispers that called out names. By the time the helicopters crossed into Brazilian airspace, the equipment on board began to glitch. Compasses spun, radios flickered, static bled into every channel, a faint rhythm echoing beneath it. Thump, 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 the heartbeat. One technician swore he could feel it under his boots, like the air itself was alive. Kane silenced him. The mission had to proceed. They set up base camp at a remote clearing designated Grid 97, miles from any known village. The air was heavy, thick with moisture, the smell of rot and iron. The jungle around them was unnervingly still. No birds, no insects, just the distant drone of that invisible pulse vibrating through the ground. At first, they laughed it off nerves, jungle fever. But by the 3rd night, laughter gave way to silence. Men began waking up at the same time, 03:17 a.m., eyes wide, heartbeats syncing perfectly with the pulse in the earth. No one said it aloud, but every man knew they were being called, and that's where every official document ends. From here on, what we know comes only from the 3 who made it back. They said the signal wasn't just a sound, it was an invitation. a summons buried beneath the soil, waiting for someone to answer. And on that fourth night, Captain Kane made the decision that sealed all their fates. We go deeper. We find the source. The jungle swallowed them whole. Chapter 2. Into the green abyss at dawn. The jungle was already awake, steaming, breathing, alive with a sound that didn't belong. The pulse had grown louder overnight. It no longer came from beneath the ground. It vibrated through the trees, through the metal frames of their tents, through the bones of anyone who stood still long enough to listen. By morning, 3 of Kane's men had nosebleeds. One collapsed mid-sentence, claiming he could hear words inside the heartbeat. Dr. Rojos recorded the sound and played it back through her analyzer. The waveform wasn't organic. It had structure, as if someone, or something, was encoding information inside the rhythm. "This isn't seismic," she whispered. "It's linguistic." Captain Kane didn't like that word. Linguistic meant intelligent. Intelligent meant unpredictable, and unpredictable meant dangerous. But the mission couldn't stop now. The source was less than 20 kilometers deeper, where satellite imagery showed a perfect circular depression in the forest canopy. They broke camp at 600 hours. The air was thick as soup. Every step forward seemed to drag them downward, as though the earth itself resisted their intrusion. By midday, they reached a ridge that overlooked the depression, a vast, bowl-shaped valley hidden beneath the trees hundreds of meters across. From above it looked like an impact crater, but there was no sign of meteorite debris. The edges were unnaturally smooth, the vegetation inside perfectly symmetrical. Nature doesn't do symmetry like that. Morera, the scout, scanned the perimeter. "Nothing living moves in there," he said quietly. "No birds, no bugs. It's dead." And yet, when they listened, the pulse was louder than ever. Thump, thump, thump. Rojos set up her instruments at the edge. "It's coming from the center," she said. Beneath the soil, the soldiers exchanged uneasy looks. The center was nearly a mile across, with dense vines, mud, and roots twisted like veins. Still, orders were orders. They descended. Within minutes, compasses spun again. GPS failed. Radios dissolved into static, though occasionally voices bled through, distorted, like whispers in a foreign language. Private Lewis swore he heard his mother's voice. Another claimed he heard someone calling his childhood nickname. Kane barked at them to stay focused. But even his tone began to falter. At 400 meters in, they found something strange. A black vine, thicker than a man's arm, pulsing faintly in rhythm with the heartbeat. It wasn't part of any known flora. Its surface shimmered like obsidian and seemed to breathe. When one of the men reached out to touch it, Rojos shouted, "Don't!" But it was too late. The vine recoiled and the soldier screamed. His hand blistered instantly, the skin turning gray and brittle. Moments later, the black pattern spread up his arm like ink under the skin. He begged them to cut it off. Kane hesitated only a second before drawing his knife. The jungle absorbed the sound of the scream. When it ended, there was silence, except for the heartbeat. Now faster, they left the body behind. By sunset, they reached the center of the crater, a pit descending into darkness, perfectly circular, ringed with petrified roots that glowed faintly under their flashlights. The ground there wasn't soil. It was something else, something smooth and cold, like stone. Rojos knelt, brushing her hand over the surface. The pulse seemed to rise through it, matching her own heart. "This isn't rock," she said softly. "It's bone." No one spoke. Then, from below the pit, came a hollow breath, not wind, not movement, but the unmistakable exhale of something alive. For the first time, even Captain Kane hesitated. They had come to find the source, and now the source had found them. Chapter 3. The sound beneath the earth. By the second night, no one slept. The jungle, once alive with chittering insects and the distant cries of unseen animals, had gone silent. Not just quiet, dead silent. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. The soldiers gathered around a dim lantern, weapons across their knees, while Dr. Rojos replayed the audio recordings. On the surface, it was the same low-frequency hum, steady, pulsing, biological. But when slowed down 20 times, something new appeared between the beats. A pattern. "It's not random," she murmured. "It's repeating like coordinates or code." Kane leaned closer. "Code for what?" Rojos hesitated. It's calling something, or calling us. No one laughed. Not anymore. Private Morera, usually the first to joke, just stared at the dirt beneath his boots, whispering that the ground was breathing. That night, around 300 hours, the ground trembled. It wasn't an earthquake. It was rhythmic, deliberate. The same heartbeat, only now it was closer. The air filled with static. Radios came alive on their own. A dozen channels flickered through with overlapping voices, men, women, even children, all whispering the same 6 words. We are already beneath the ground. Then the power cut out. Every flashlight, every piece of tech, dead. For almost a full minute, the only light came from the faint blue luminescence oozing between the cracks of the earth. Rojos grabbed her camera, trying to film, but the screen showed static, except for one frame. A blur of motion, a shape, something moving inside the ground. Just below the surface, Kane ordered a retreat to higher ground. But the soil under their feet shifted like wet sand. One of the men, Corporal Reeves, screamed as he sank waist-deep before anyone could react. They tried to pull him out, and then they saw what had him, the black vine, only now it wasn't a vine at all. It writhed like muscle, thick cords moving under translucent layers of mud, almost aware. It coiled tighter, dragging Reeves down, bone by bone, until only his helmet remained above the surface. Then silence again. And the heartbeat, slower now, satisfied. The team stumbled back, shaken, muttering prayers. At dawn, Rojos analyzed the disturbed soil near where Reeves disappeared. Beneath the top layer was something solid, smooth, curved, almost like architecture. She brushed away the dirt and froze. Carved into the surface were symbols, intricate spirals, perfect geometric patterns that shimmered faintly in the morning light. It's the same, she whispered. The same symbols from the Nazca dig. From the Siberian ice cores. This is connected. Kane didn't care about patterns. He wanted extraction. But command didn't respond. Every transmission returned nothing but distortion, and underneath it, that same pulse, stronger than ever. We're sitting on a transmitter, Rojos said quietly. Whatever's down there, it's not dead. It's broadcasting. That word lingered in the air. Broadcasting. Kane looked toward the pit at the crater's center, where faint mist rose, glowing faintly in the morning light. He didn't say it aloud, but everyone knew what he was thinking. If something was broadcasting, there had to be a receiver, and maybe somewhere deep in that black expanse of earth, the jungle wasn't waiting to be explored. It was listening. Chapter 4, The Patterns By. The 4th day, exhaustion had replaced fear. The men no longer talked about escape. They only stared at the carvings, the strange, luminous spirals emerging from beneath the soil like veins of light. Dr. Rojos refused to stop studying them. Her notebooks were filled with sketches, equations, fragments of languages no one had seen before. She'd cross-referenced them against her memory. Glyphs from the Nazca lines, the markings from the underwater Yonaguni structures, symbols etched into Siberian ice, and every time she whispered the same word. Pattern. Each culture, each site, across continents and centuries, the same spiral repeating, always connected to disappearance. Private Lewis muttered that maybe the jungle was writing, that it had always been writing. We'd just never learned to read it. That night, Rojos replayed the recording again, this time through a field spectrometer. The sound wasn't just a vibration, it was a structure of sound frequencies forming the same geometric pattern she had drawn. It's a map, she breathed. The heartbeat, it's mapping something beneath us. Captain Kane stared at the drawings. Mapping what? Another chamber. Rojos met his eyes. No, a shape. A living one. That was the moment morale broke. Half the men demanded evacuation. The other half, those drawn by the pulse, wanted to keep digging. They said they could feel the coordinates in their dreams. Kane ordered everyone to rest, but no one slept. The pulse had shifted again. It wasn't just under them anymore. It was inside them. Private Morera woke screaming, his back arching, his hands clawing the air. His veins glowed faintly blue, pulsing in rhythm with the ground. When they cut open his sleeve, they saw the spiral pattern forming beneath his skin, perfect, deliberate, alive. It's learning our biology, Rojos whispered. It's rewriting it. Kane tried to contact command again. Static. No coordinates, no voices. Only that sound. the sound of something vast and slow turning beneath the crust. At dawn, a fog rolled through the crater. It didn't behave like normal mist. It moved in circular motion, almost intentional. The symbols beneath their feet brightened, and the soil began to hum. Rojos stood in the center of the clearing, transfixed. "It's communicating," she said. "It's showing us what it is." And for a moment they all saw it, not with their eyes, but through a shared vision that hit like a seizure, a massive structure of bone and stone coiled beneath the earth, pulsating like a living continent. They saw veins of light stretching from the Amazon to the Pacific, to the Arctic, to deserts where ancient civilizations once stood, every pattern, every symbol, every disappearance, all connected to a single organism, something older than humanity, something that grew with the planet itself. Then the vision ended. Blood poured from their noses. A few men collapsed. When Kane came to, Rojos was gone. Only her notebook remained, open to the last page, where she had scrawled one final message in trembling handwriting. "It's not the jungle. The jungle is part of it." And below that, a single symbol, the spiral, drawn in blood. Chapter 5. The disappearance begins. 600 words. By the fifth night, the jungle was no longer just a backdrop. It was awake. The trees leaned closer. The air trembled with a low resonance that vibrated through the men's teeth and bones. They'd stopped marking the days. Their watches had gone haywire, compasses still spun, and the sun seemed to rise and fall at the wrong hours. Captain Kane's team was down to 23 men. The others had either vanished or turned on each other in the dark confusion of night patrols. They found Morera's rifle half buried in mud, no body, just his footprints leading into the crater and ending abruptly as if he'd stepped into air. "The ground took him," someone muttered. "The ground wants us," another whispered. The survivors began avoiding sleep, fearing the dreams. Those who did drift off woke screaming, describing the same vision, roots curling around their limbs, whispering in languages they somehow understood. Dr. Rojos was still missing, but her absence hadn't ended her influence. Every man swore they could hear her voice, not in their ears, but in their heads, calm, deliberate, urging them to listen to the pattern. That night, Kane ordered them to move camp away from the pit. It didn't matter. Wherever they went, the sound followed. Thump, thump, thump. A heartbeat too slow to be human, too rhythmic to be random. At 2200 hours, Private Heller reported seeing movement in the trees. Silhouettes that looked human but moved wrong, too fluid, their limbs bending where joints shouldn't. Kine dismissed it as hallucination, until one of them stepped into the firelight. It wore remnants of a uniform, their uniform, but its skin was translucent, its veins black, pulsing with faint blue light. The face was half familiar. "Morera?" one of the men whispered. The figure tilted its head, eyes empty, mouth opening wider than it should, and then it screamed, a sound not made by lungs, but by the earth itself. The jungle responded instantly. Every root, every vine, moved. The camp erupted into chaos, gunfire cracking through the darkness as men were dragged into the soil by tendrils that moved like muscle. Kane emptied half a magazine before realizing the bullets did nothing. The vines didn't bleed. They absorbed the rounds. When the movement finally stopped, the clearing was still again. 14 men remained. They found the others' weapons scattered, their helmets filled with soil. No blood, no struggle marks, just the faint smell of ozone, like after a lightning strike. At dawn, the survivors packed what they could and began retreating east. The pulse was still there, but quieter, like it was waiting. Halfway through the march, Private Lewis began convulsing. When they lifted his shirt, they saw black vines branching beneath his skin, growing. "It's using us," Kane said quietly. "We're the fertilizer." They left Lewis behind. No one argued. By sunset, the sound changed again, no longer a heartbeat, but a slow inhale, as if something massive below was waking up. The ground seemed to breathe with it, expanding and contracting under their boots. The men stared at each other, hollow-eyed. There was no question now. They hadn't discovered anything. They had awakened it. This is Chapter 6. The Thing in the Mound. 600 words. the point where the story shifts from terror in the jungle to pure cosmic dread. Chapter 6. The Thing in the Mound. By the time they reached the crater again, dawn had vanished behind a sky the color of wet ash. The jungle was silent. Not even the insects dared to make a sound. The mound stood at the center, larger than before, as if it had grown overnight. Its surface wasn't just soil anymore. Beneath the dirt, they saw movement, a slow, undulating pulse that matched the sound echoing in their chests. Dr. Rojos was waiting for them. At least, something wearing her shape was. She stood barefoot. At the base of the mound, her eyes pitch black, her hands coated in the same oily residue that slicked the vines. Her expression was serene, like someone who'd finally found peace after years of torment. "You shouldn't have come back," she said softly. "It's awake now." Kyan raised his rifle. "What is it, Doctor? What did you find?" Rojos smiled, tilting her head. "Not what. Who?" Behind her, the mound shuddered. Cracks split across its surface, and a pale blue glow seeped through. The vines moved as one, not randomly, but with purpose, like a single vast organism breathing through the soil. Private Jensen took a step forward. "We need to blow it up, Cap. We can end this now." Rojos turned to him, voice calm. "And you can't end what started you." Then the mound split open. It didn't explode. It unfolded, petal by petal, revealing layers of glistening tissue and bone, arranged like architecture rather than anatomy. Inside was a hollow sphere, carved with the same impossible geometric patterns they'd found on the walls, shapes that hurt to look at, that twisted when you tried to understand them. Kyan stumbled back, his vision fracturing. The heartbeat grew louder, shaking the air itself. Out of the glowing pit, something rose. It wasn't a creature, not in any sense they knew. It had no clear form, just overlapping outlines, hundreds of limbs or none, shifting in and out of reality like an image trying to exist in the wrong dimension. The men opened fire, the noise drowned instantly by the pulse. Their bullets vanished mid-air, swallowed by the light. Rojos stepped toward the thing, unafraid. "Do you hear it now?" she whispered. "It's not calling us. It's remembering us." The mound responded. The light surged outward, a wave that passed through the men, not over them. Those who were touched began to change, their flesh rippling, eyes darkening, skin taking on that same translucent shimmer. Kane dragged 2 soldiers back, firing blindly. "Fall back!" he shouted. "Everyone fall back now!" But the jungle had already turned against them. Roots writhed up from the ground, forming walls. The path they came from was gone, replaced by black vines weaving together like muscle and bone. The mound pulsed again, and from its light shapes emerged, human forms, men from the earlier patrols, faces Kane recognized, voices calling his name. He fired until his rifle clicked empty. The figures didn't flinch. Then, through the haze, Rojos looked at him. For a moment, truly her again. "Seal it," she said. "Don't let it spread." The light swallowed her before he could answer. Kane grabbed the detonator from his pack, screaming for the others to move. The men sprinted for the tree line, vines slashing at their legs. He hit the switch. The explosion tore through the jungle, a thunderous roar that sent shockwaves through the trees and sky. Fire bloomed, and the mound collapsed inward like a dying lung. When the smoke cleared, the jungle was gone. Just black soil, silent and still. But under the silence, beneath the scorched earth, the heartbeat continued, faint, distant, alive. Chapter 7. Extraction. Denied. The radio came back to life at dawn. A burst of static that sliced through the heavy silence. For a second it sounded like salvation. "Command, this is Kane. Operation Night Harvest is compromised. We need immediate extraction." "Repeat, immediate extraction." Static. Then a faint voice. "Say again, Night Harvest." "That designation doesn't exist." Kane froze. "What the hell do you mean it doesn't exist?" 37 men went in. "We have wounded." "We need evac now." Another long pause. Then, colder this time. "There is no record of any operation under that name." "Identify yourself." He looked around at the surviving soldiers, faces streaked with dirt, eyes hollow, bodies trembling. They'd marched through hell, and now even their own command refused to see them. "This is Captain Elias Kane, Special Recon Unit 12, he growled. "Grid 97. We engaged an unknown biological anomaly." The radio hissed and went dead. Morera kicked the mud. "They cut us off." Just like that. They tried again. Different frequencies. Emergency codes. Nothing. Every signal ended in static. Or worse, in that same low pulse echoing faintly through the speakers like the machine itself was infected. By noon they understood. They weren't being rescued. They were being erased. The realization spread like infection. Quiet at first, then panic. 2 soldiers broke down, screaming that the jungle was a trap, that they were already dead. Kane slapped one across the face. "No one dies here unless I say so." But the words rang hollow. The air grew hotter, heavier. Even the insects refused to return. The ground where the mound had been was still smoking, but beneath it they could feel vibrations, faint, regular, like breathing through stone. Dr. Rojos's warning echoed in Kane's head. "Seal it. Don't let it spread." He gathered the remaining men. "We walk east until we hit the river. Then we burn every page, every photo, every damn thing that could point anyone here again." Understood. They moved fast, no breaks, no campfires. Food ran out. Sleep became a luxury. The jungle began reclaiming everything behind them. Within hours, the blast site was swallowed by new growth. At dusk, a plane passed overhead. They fired flares. No response. It just kept flying. Morera muttered, "They see us. They're just pretending they don't." 3 days later, the first man started coughing blood, then another. Their skin began to darken around the veins, faint blue light flickering beneath. Kane stared horrified. No, it's not over. They tried cutting the infected flesh away. It didn't help. The light spread faster. In desperation, they left the sick behind, whispering prayers none of them believed anymore. By the 5th day, only 3 remained. Kane, Morera, Dr. Rojos, or what was left of her mind. They reached the river, collapsing on the bank. Across the water, a native village flickered through the mist. For a second, Kane thought they were saved. Then he saw it. The villagers standing silently, eyes black, their skin shimmering faintly with that same bioluminescent glow. Morera whispered, "It's everywhere." Kane loaded his last magazine. "Then we bury it again." They turned upriver, searching for dynamite from the supply crates they'd cached on arrival. Behind them, the jungle rustled, not wind, but breathing. Before dawn, they detonated the final charges. The shockwave flattened trees for miles. When the dust settled, nothing remained. Not the mound, not the camp, not the village. Just silence. Extraction never came. No reports were filed. No medals were issued. Operation Night Harvest didn't exist. But something in the earth still did. Chapter 8. The Return to Civilization. When they finally saw the first paved road, it didn't feel real. After weeks of wading through mud and blood and fevered silence, the world beyond the jungle looked wrong. Too bright, too loud, too normal. Cars hummed. Radios played music. People laughed. All of it felt like a hallucination. Captain Kane, Sergeant Morera, and Dr. Rojos stumbled into a small Amazonian outpost, half dead from dehydration and infection. Their uniforms were shredded, their skins scorched from the blast. The locals stared as they collapsed near the river dock, mumbling coordinates no one understood. An aid worker tried to help, asking who they were. Kane handed him a blood-stained notebook. "Tell command. Night Harvest failed." But when the message reached the military channel, the response was chillingly familiar. "There is no Operation Night Harvest. Please verify your identity." They were treated at a missionary clinic, where the nurse said quietly, "You weren't the first soldiers we've seen come out of that jungle, but you might be the first who walked out." Dr. Rojos barely spoke. She stared at the ceiling for hours, whispering numbers under her breath, long sequences of prime digits that didn't seem random. Sometimes she drew shapes on the sheets, spirals, fractals, the same patterns they'd seen carved into stone. Morera refused to sleep indoors. He built a small fire outside the clinic every night, staring into it like the flames might talk back. When someone asked why, he said, "The silence is worse." Kane tried to report. He sent letters, telegrams, even coded dispatches through old military contacts. No one replied. 3 weeks later, 2 men in plain clothes arrived. They claimed to be from the embassy. They asked questions, not about what happened, but about what they'd seen. About sounds, patterns, light. Kane refused to answer. Moreira nearly attacked one of them. By morning, the embassy men were gone, and so were all of Kane's notes. That night, Rojos went missing. Her bed was empty, her window open, footprints leading toward the forest. They searched until sunrise, but the trail ended at the river. Moreira said quietly, "She went back to finish what we couldn't." 2 days later, the clinic burned down. The cause was unknown. The survivors were moved to a government facility in Manaus, where they were kept under observation for weeks. Blood tests, psychological exams, endless questions. The doctors noted elevated electromagnetic readings from their skin. Residual exposure, they called it. But Kane noticed something else. Every night at exactly 03:12 a.m., the lights in their room flickered. Not random, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. He asked to see the recordings from the monitoring devices. The logs showed electrical surges, repeating every 12.6 seconds. He didn't need the math. He already knew the pattern. On the 43rd day of quarantine, the 3 remaining soldiers were quietly released. No medals, no debriefing. Just an unsigned document, "You were never there." Moreira disappeared within a month. Some said he joined a private expedition heading back into the jungle. Others said he simply walked into the forest one night and didn't come out. Kane stayed. He kept his silence, moving from base to base, always watching, always listening. But sometimes, late at night, he'd hear it again. Faint. Under the hum of the generator. Thump, thump, thump. And he'd whisper to the dark, "I know you're still there." Because deep down he understood, you can leave the jungle. But the jungle doesn't leave you. Chapter 9. The Global Pattern. Years passed. The jungle faded into rumor, into the kind of classified myth whispered between soldiers and scientists who'd seen too much. But Captain Kane never stopped looking. In 1972, he received an unmarked envelope. No name, no return address, just a strip of microfilm and a single line of text. It wasn't the only one. The footage was grainy but unmistakable. Satellite reconnaissance. A dense ring of foliage, pulsing faintly with bioluminescent patterns. Not in the Amazon this time, but deep in the Congo basin. He sent it to the only person who'd believe him, Dr. Elena Rojos. He hadn't heard from her since she vanished years earlier. So when a reply came a month later, handwritten, careful, it chilled him. "I told you I went back." "I never left." "They grow in clusters, Kane. The forest is one organism, spread across continents. What we saw was just one nerve ending." He read that line over and over. One nerve ending. If the Amazon structure was just a node, how many others pulsed beneath the Earth's surface, sleeping, waiting? He dug deeper. Old colonial logs, WB2 expedition reports, declassified geologic surveys. Again and again, the same anomalies appeared. 1939. A German expedition lost in Borneo after finding a singing cave that breathed. 1951. Soviet researchers vanished near Lake Baikal, leaving behind a journal describing a heartbeat in the ground. 1963. A U.S. Navy sonar array in the Pacific recorded rhythmic pulses beneath the seafloor, identical to those near Site Theta. Different continents, same frequency, same pattern. It wasn't coincidence. It was connectivity. Kane met a retired CIA analyst in Caracas, a man who'd heard whispers of Project Rootline, a Cold War operation to map living geological entities. When Kane showed him Rojos's letter, the man's hands trembled. "You don't get it, Captain. The forests aren't reacting to us. They're remembering us." He explained how multiple governments had quietly sealed off zones, fenced jungles, forbidden islands, restricted valleys, all classified as biological hazard sites. But no known pathogen had ever been recovered. Only sound, only pattern. Kane couldn't sleep. Every radio hiss, every tap of the rain sounded like that rhythmic pulse again. He began hearing it in his dreams, and worse, he began to see it. Subtle spirals in cloud formations, repeating geometry and satellite topography. Even city lights at night seemed to mimic the same design. He mailed his findings to Rojos, but the letters came back marked "Return to Sender." Then, one night, he received a call. The voice was faint, almost mechanical, but familiar. "They're waking up, Kane. The soil hums before it breathes. You have to listen. It was Rojos, or something that sounded like her. The line went dead. The next morning, a small article appeared in a South American paper. Mysterious sinkhole devours research station near Rio Puras. No survivors. Satellite photos showed the region glowing faintly for 3 nights, and then silence. Kane realized something terrible. The forest wasn't expanding randomly. It was moving with purpose, like veins converging on a heart. He drew a map, all the reported sites, all the missing expeditions, all the forbidden zones. When he connected the dots, the pattern was unmistakable. A global spiral, curling inward toward one final untouched region, Antarctica, and beneath the ice, seismic sensors had started picking up something rhythmic, something old. Chapter 10, The Final Transmission. The signal came from Antarctica. In 1976, a seismic research team stationed near Vostok Base detected a rhythmic vibration beneath the ice. Not tectonic, not mechanical. It pulsed in perfect 12.6-second intervals, the same pattern that haunted Captain Kane's every dream. They transmitted the data to international labs. But within days, the recordings vanished from official archives. Every copy erased, except one. Kane received it through an anonymous courier, delivered in a metal canister stamped with a single word, Theta. He played it on an old reel-to-reel recorder in his dim apartment. The sound began as a low hum, then deepened, resonating in his bones. And buried in that hum was something unmistakably alive. A whisper, faint, layered, impossible. It wasn't in any language he knew, yet he understood. It was calling. He sat there, paralyzed, as images flooded his mind. The jungle pulsing in the dark, Rojos's face lit by blue light, the spiraling pattern etched into stone, and something deeper, something beneath the earth's crust, stirring after a million years of sleep. That night, he started bleeding from the ears. Doctors called it neural resonance trauma. He called it contact. Kane vanished soon after. His apartment was left untouched, except for the recorder, still spinning, tape flapping in the reel. The hum never stopped, even after the power was cut. Months later, a classified UN task force quietly launched Operation Deep Signal to investigate the anomaly beneath Antarctica. But what they found wasn't ice. It was organic. A living structure, buried deep below the frozen crust, stretching for miles. Veins, cavities, rhythmic movement. The team drilled to collect samples. The feed transmitted for 19 minutes before going silent. The last words from the expedition leader were calm, almost mesmerized. It's not under us. We're inside it. After that, the coordinates of the base were erased from all maps. A no-fly zone was established for research safety, and any mention of rhythmic seismic patterns was officially classified as instrumental error, but signals continued. Weak, intermittent. From the Amazon, from the Congo, from the Pacific, all synchronized, all breathing together. 5 years later, an unmarked transmission appeared on a shortwave radio frequency used only by retired military channels. The voice was rough, distorted, but human. This is Captain R. Kane. If you hear this, it's too late. They're awake. The forest was the skin. The ice was the bone. We were never outside, and we were always inside. Then, a burst of static. Then silence. The signal has never been traced. But sometimes, late at night, researchers monitoring global seismic data still notice it. A faint pulse, repeating every 12.6 seconds, perfectly synchronized across the planet. Most dismiss it as background noise. A few know better. Because when they isolate the frequency and amplify the signal, it isn't random vibration. It's a pattern, a voice, and it's saying the same word over and over again, in a rhythm that sounds eerily like a heartbeat. Alive.